Welcome to another edition of the Zimbabwe Education Diary, where we discuss milestones, challenges and opportunities that are there in terms of achieving SDG 4 since 2015. And today we are discussing access to quality tertiary education. And my name is Clement Lizio, and I am your host. To discuss today, I've got two gentlemen and a lady. Maybe let me start with the gentlemen for introductions.
My name is Sendisa Ndlovu. I'm with the students and youths working on reproductive health action team. We work in the space of the education sector on the issues of health and access to education. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Clemens. Thank you for having me. I'm Lennon Tagudzo Mazuru, representing Zimbabwe National Students Union, SINASU. We advocate for academic freedoms and rights in all tertiary institutions in Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Clemens. My name is Rosalind Mujeni, and I'm from Female Students Network Trust, and we advocate for SRHR in tertiary institutions and universities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe starting with you, Sindiso, what has been the milestone that we've achieved in terms of making sure that tertiary education becomes accessible in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, I think we've done pretty much well as a country. You know the journey that we have traveled from 1980 when we had one single university, but now we can talk of more than 18, 19 state universities and private universities. You can talk of other categories also expanding, your teacher training colleges. We've expanded the agricultural colleges. We have enrobed the vocational training centers to address the psychomotor skills in the context of Zimbabwe, also responding to the industrial needs, the changing terrain in terms of development, the type of graduate that we expect from our universities. Mm-hmm. So I think those have been significant gains. And also the expanding of the type of programs. We are moving into a space where we are beginning to incorporate more trade-related programs, skills program, which are not pretty much focused on the academic side. So I think that's a good and great milestone for the country. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And coming to ZINASU, what are some of the milestones that we've achieved as a country?
Looking back, maybe to start with from 2015, September 2015, whereby we started to focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs. It's been ups and downs as we see it, looking at the inclusivity, affordability and accessibility of education, especially for women and men to tertiary education. And due to the pandemic which came in between, it became so hard. So for up to date, for now, to where we stand, I think there's much more to do for us to reach 2030, the Vision 2030.
Mm-hmm. What are the milestones in making sure that the girl child accesses, quality tertiary education in Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Clemens. I'm from Female Students Network Trust. Yes, that's all right. Okay, I just wanted to say, firstly, I appreciate the fact that we as women and girls, we're being incorporated in the education system. And also, before, sciences, like the subject sciences, they were for boys and men. Mm-hmm. And now we are included, and we've got a zeal to prove that what men can do, we can also do. So I feel that's a milestone, which the inclusiveness of women and girls in the education.
Yes. That's it in terms of girls. In terms of girls' education, Cindy, so if you might need to come
expand.
Yeah, thanks, Clemens. I think one of the key milestones we've seen is you will see that there is a general increase in terms of the enrollment of girls. And there is the second milestone, which is key, what she was mentioning, that to say in the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, there's been a gradual increase in the number of young women going into those areas, although we still have gaps and we need to do more. But key for me is the learning environment. If you are talking about women's active and inclusive involvement, we say we begin to ask critical questions. Our environments free from sexual harassment, for example, because it creates an unsafe environment where female learners may not feel comfortable to fully express themselves and reach their full potential. we also look at the budgeting of universities in tertiary education. Do they cater for the other strategic and practical gender needs? Your menstrual health, access to sanitary pads, the type of recreation that we found in the university space. Is it addressing the feminine needs in terms of recreation and sports for girls? So yes, I'll agree, we've made significant milestones, but we need to begin to be more intentional to do what I will call reasonable accommodation of the needs of the girl child. At the level of recruitment, how much do we open up to be intentional to say 6% of our enrollment, for example, should go to women, in context of the population size, to say 52% of our population are women anyway. And then how are we intentional to provide scholarships for the young women to be having access to the grants, the funds, to go through the education? How are we intentional to create policies outside academics? Your sexual harassment policy, the provision of the gender policy, and so forth, so that the environment becomes very level in terms of ensuring that both boys and girls have got a good learning environment.
Lennon, coming to you, he's speaking about the learning environment. You as NASU, and you are the ones that are on the ground. What is the learning environment like for all universities and the institution of higher learning? What is it? Is it receptive for the girl child?
Speaking of the milestone, I would agree with all panelists here that the greatest milestone as a country is the enrollment of girls or women in all tertiary institutions, including vocational training centers, including polytechnics and all universities. If you check, you see a quite percentage, like a large percentage of females in all these institutions. So when you
so in terms of access, we are saying, we are getting there
in terms of exactly
both for the boy child and the girl child, we are getting there in terms of access to higher and tertiary education.
Yes, like my colleague here was saying, back then we would see only males were maybe just accessing all those maybe engineering stuff or sciences, but now we are seeing more females enrolling or into those programs. So it's a great milestone in terms to that. But then when it comes to the learning environment, whereby we are talking about access, we are talking about affordability. That's the biggest challenge, because you would see in the tertiary institutions there is a large drop of students who are deferring due to lack of funds to continue. Exactly, to continue with their studies, and due to the economic challenges in the country, it's also very hard for all learners, be it women, be it men, to access education. So that's the environment when it comes to safety for ladies and women. We are seeing a number of cases whereby in tertiary institutions they say lecturers are demanding a thigh for a mark, especially when it comes to a girl child. So it's a thing where we need to put in frameworks and policies which defend and protect the women and the girl child in all these learning institutions.
He spoke about a thigh for marks.
Yes.
Is it happening in school?
Yes, it is happening.
And what have you done to it as Female Student Network? And what would you encourage the institutions to do to end this thing?
Thigh for marks is happening, but I think maybe they need to be put in place, like policies to protect the girl child, and also educate the girls and the women in the tertiary institutions and universities on how to report and where to report if such is to happen to them, and also educate them on it's their right to say no, but also there are others who are a bit lazy. They'll feel like, okay, thigh for marks, what's the worst that can happen, and they do it, but it's not supposed to happen. So I feel there should be policies in place, and then also like educating them on where to report, how to report, and follow up on that. Like action, there needs to be action, because at times a lecturer is superior, and when a girl child feels like if I report my case, no one will hear me or nothing will happen to the lecturer, and it continues. So there needs to be maybe punishments or stiffer penalties for the lecturers who do that and
Yeah, but you know, I've been listening to this issue, you know, and listening to other documents that even, you know, the argument is that, you know, these are adults who consent. What do you say about that, Sindis?
That's an interesting one. But I was saying before getting there, I was saying this is a systemic gap in the higher education sector.
Yeah.
So if you want to address sexual harassment at a systematic level, we should basically put three things in place. There should be policies that clearly define what is sexual harassment. What are the prevention mechanisms? What are the mitigation mechanisms? How do they manage sexual harassment? So we've got a document. And then we need a clear procedure to say when there is sexual harassment, what happens? And then we need the structure of human resource, the people who are specialized to deal with sexual harassment. So I will not agree to say these are adults. By definition, sexual harassment becomes any sexual move expressed verbally or non-verbally, which is unwelcome. We can be adults in this room with Rose from FSN, but if I begin to make sexual moves that are unwelcome to Rose, my sister there, that has nothing to do with her being an adult. It's about my behavior of making an unwanted move of a sexual nature. And in the context of power dynamics, you have got an 18-year-old girl straight from university, from my high school, yep, with the 15-point results, 14-point results, and they meet Professor Sandisa Love, 63. And you know how they introduce themselves? I've been to Michigan, I've been to Harvard, and, you know. So the power dynamic there just goes wrong. The power dynamic goes wrong. So I think when we're beginning to look at long-term sustainable higher education sector, we need to address the power dynamics that exist. So I don't buy to these are adults. Because there's the aspect of the sexual move, number one. Number two, it's unwelcome. Even at a workplace, Clemens, if you make moves that are unwelcome, it remains sexual harassment.
True.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. We've got a lot to discuss. Let me get into another area of interest.
Yes.
COVID-19. How did it affect, you know, access to tertiary education? Zinas.
Okay, the introduction of COVID-19, the pandemic which came in 2020, brought a lot of issues. To start with, accessibility of campuses. We could not access campuses, and we were forced to stay at home. Then it also came with a digital divide. And as a nation, we are not ready to introduce e-learning. So when you talk about COVID-19, we are talking of something which stole a lot of time from us, because we took so much time to try to adapt to the situation. But you know, as learners, we need to proceed, we need to progress in terms of our education and learning. And it took time for also institution or even the government to implement, to put in place mechanism of mitigating such challenges. So when you see the issue of data, of digital inclusion, it's a thing which we were a bit behind as a nation in terms of digital inclusion. So when we speak about COVID-19, we lacked so much. So by now we are still trying to cover the gap and the time which we lost during the COVID-19 in terms of that.
Thank you. We are discussing about access to inclusive tertiary education, and we are taking a break. We'll come back shortly and take it further. Welcome back. We are discussing today about access to inclusive quality tertiary education. And when we went for the break, we were talking about COVID-19. How did it affect? And were we ready as a nation? Are we ready to take on digital learning?
Thank you, Clemens. I just wanted to say that COVID-19 caught us unprepared as a nation. Well, like worldwide, no one was prepared for it. And it really affected in terms of education. Like my fellow panelist was alluding that the digital era, like in Zimbabwe, we know there's an issue of electricity, and other students were based in the rural areas and there's no access to Wi-Fi or data. Data bundles are expensive, and that really affected everyone. And yeah.
Yeah, but I'm observing most universities nowadays are actually going the online route, especially at master's level, where you do this online lessons and everything. With all the challenge that you're bringing, the challenge to do with data, the challenge to do with affordability and so forth, how effective is this in making sure that, the students actually get quality learning through online? Cindy?
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. I will not dwell much into the challenges. It's clear we were caught unprepared. There are so many challenges. The information asymmetry, rural versus urban, ghetto versus cross Samara Machel, the haves and the have-nots. I think that is very clear. I think for me, we really need to relook at our education system from the level of budgeting, to say when we're budgeting for education, are we budgeting at national level, at university level, and incorporating us being prepared for emergencies? It's not just COVID-19. It can be climate change emergency in Jews. It can be any other emergency. So I think one thing which is coming through for the education system is that we can't run away from these emergencies. So in terms of preparedness, we're not, but there is a big opportunity to expand in terms of reach to learners through the e-learning system. But we then have to complement that to say, who then has got this access to the e-learning space? So we make sure that our young women and young men from the rural areas should have access. Number two, our other subpopulations who are technologically excluded, technically, for example, the young people with disabilities, those with visual impairment, those with hearing impairment, those with cognitive impairment, how do we incorporate them into the e-learning system? And also, how do we design our own locally made learning systems, which we have control over, we can adopt to our own environment? I think it has been a lot of cut and paste for me to say this has worked somewhere in this developed country, let's cut and paste in Zimbabwe. So I think we have to up the game, even for our young people to say, let's bring in even components of the education 5.0. How do we develop softwares that are tailored for Zimbabwe? We saw what was coming out of HIT when COVID-19 started. The young men and women trying to come up with those ventilators. That's the kind of approach to say, how does the education system itself make the right investments in the young people to innovate, co-create, and be better prepared for any emergency, not just COVID-19, any emergency. We should have our education system being a backup pillar to respond. Yes.
Lennon,
Yes.
Cindy spoke about Education 5.0.
Yeah.
How far have we gone as a nation in embracing Education 5.0? Is it working?
Well, Education 5.0, as we have been observing and doing checks and balances since its commencement, I think as a nation, we need to upgrade also.
Are we on the right direction?
Yeah, we are on the right direction. We are taking the right path, but we need to be bold enough to embrace the changes, because it seems there are some resistances. Because when we say we are going for Education 5.0, it means also our society must be Society 5.0. That way, there must be cohesion of everything, the education and the society, right? So when we are implementing and doing the education 5.0, it means the nation, the government needs to capacitate with everything, the infrastructure, the resources, and everything, so that the model will be useful. The model can be a total change for this nation. So I think, yes, taking the route of education 5.0 is the right route, but the mechanisms to be put in place so that we achieve what we want to achieve with education 5.0 are lacking.
Yeah, but let's be articulate here.
Yes.
What are the mechanisms? What do we want to see on the ground to make sure that education 5.0 becomes a reality?
Yeah, we are talking about internet connectivity. We need to research. Right, we need to do researches. We need labs so that we do our experiments there. You see, but we don't have such. When you talk about internet connectivity, we are talking there's no power. The data tariffs are so high. You see, so. But I thought
education 5.0 would actually bring in innovative ways of actually
That's what I was saying. As a nation, we need to go into society 5.0, whereby when we say we have gone education from 5.0, right? We need, like we say right now. We are experiencing power cuts, right? There in Wanke, they are trying to rehabilitate the station there. But are they giving the students of Zimbabwe the time to take part in there? Because Zimbabwe now is more like a lab for everyone to just come and do experiments and go. And yes, that's we are now in a lab.
I see you're not yet.
I'm happy my colleague from NAS has talked about the mechanism. For me, the first mechanism is to learn from the global community.
Yes.
We are now a global village. I think Zimbabwe should up its game in terms of learning from the global community, but also putting what we have in terms of from our own context and environment. That's why for this SDG 4, they are coming from that international, transnational, village of doing business. But important for me is we know that financial resources are key. So of our national budget, education, we should actually get a reasonable allocation of that. We talk of the Dhaka Declaration saying 20%, the SADC Protocol on Education saying 22%, but it's not just a 22% allocation to the education sector, but it's how much of that 22% goes to infrastructure development, goes to the human resource, goes to research. You don't become education 5.0 or society 5.0 without investing in research. If you look elsewhere, governments support research in the range of 3 billion, 30 billion, because it's something that we are investing for the country, and you can own that research findings and influence policies. But also importantly, is to then combine it with clear programs that will then create young people who can access the education sector. So it might be very difficult to say education 5.0 when the young people themselves are not in the space and are given the space to pick on what to research, how to research with the professional guidance. So it's an intersectionality of a lot of issues, Clemens. But I think we can do it as a country. We have the political will, we have the young people, we have the energy, and we are part of the global family. Now we are talking about SDG 4, the milestone 4.3. That for me, we are in the right direction.
I feel like what everyone here was saying, that we are in the right track, but then infrastructure development, there is need for our infrastructure to be developed, and also maybe for the government or the education ministry to maybe for the girl child, I'm going to sound biased, I'm sorry, to scholarships for the girl child, and also maybe, I don't know if it's still happening at the University of Zimbabwe, they used to get allowances to avoid the issues of sexual SRHR, like when the girl child will go for sugar daddies just to get airtime, data bundles,
student grants.
Yes, student grants. Yeah. So I was thinking maybe they could also incorporate that whilst we are working towards achieving that for the 2030.
You know, but you know what baffles me is Zimbabwe is always producing all these electrical engineers, year in, year out, each university is churning out these engineers, but we continue to face power cuts, we continue to face all these challenges. Where are we getting it wrong? Where are we getting it wrong? Are we being a training ground for others, and we are failing to
Yeah, it's just saying, like, you're talking about electrician, like there in UK, you said that you saw that engineer inventing an electrical bus. It's
a Zimbabwean.
He's a Zimbabwean, right? As I have alluded before, that we need to become society 5.0 because there's no cohesion when you say we want to remain like this, whilst we want to upgrade. There is resistance there. So it starts with the top leadership there. How it put in place mechanisms and channels to implement such models. That's where it starts. And proper tracking, checks and balances, and make sure that we implement what we have started.
And one of the critical mechanism for me is the budget.
Yes.
That goes towards education. Do you think now the budget is adequate to make sure that there is that universal access of tertiary education in this country?
Yeah, I think we have all seen that gap. If you look, for example, in the budget, prior to this current setup, universities will also receive grants themselves. Not grants to students, grants to universities to fund and support their own university-related developments. If they want to put up a research center, if they want to support their students to invest in this research. So that has not been happening of late. So I think that's a gap. In terms of budget allocation to develop the human resource, which is the student, she talked about the grant system. I think we need to really look at what model can we adopt and use as Zimbabwe, so that we have at the university people who get through to university out of a merit and less of out of them affording to pay for university tuition. And then we leave out the very best of brains there in the ghetto, there in the rural areas, but they don't have the funds to pay the tuition fee. So I think that's a huge gap that we need to address. And then also the funds to support the human resource at the universities. Usually it becomes garbage in, garbage out. If a lot of brain drain of professors, doctors going to greener pastures, we have products from universities that are not of the very best quality that we want. So we need to maintain our human resource of high quality in terms of their work, and working conditions should be good enough to make them want to stay and make a difference in their own country. I think we have already talked about so many human resources outside Zimbabwe who are making a difference. So let's just look that's being provided for them there. How do we retain them? How do we incentivize them to stay in Zimbabwe? How do we incentivize them to see the bigger picture of having Zimbabwe being that upper middle income country by 2030? Yes.
Zinas, what funding model can actually work for us in terms of tertiary education?
I feel like when it comes to budget, sectors like education needs to be prioritized the most, because education is the key sector which upholds us as a nation, which upholds our societies. So when the government is doing its budget or doing it needs to make sure that it puts more fund into education, because that's where most of the inventories come from. That's where more of the development comes from. It comes from the education, because we need sustainability as a nation. So more funding to education sector.
And to you, Rose, maybe lastly?
No, I just like what they said is correct. But also I just wanted to say also, I feel it's also important that inclusion of everyone, including the ghetto youths who are out there in the ghetto. They've got talents, they've got things that they can do using their hands. So there is need for maybe the I don't know, maybe the ministry or some individuals to go out there and fish them out so that they can be productive instead of doing drug and substance abuse.
More like scouting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. It leaves me with nothing but just to thank the panelists for an interesting discussion that we had in terms of access to tertiary education, and they've spoken to issues to do with SRHR, they've spoken to issues to do with financing of the education, where they say the government should prioritize financing education. And we have come to an end of our exciting program. We will meet again in the next expo. My name is Clement Lizio. Thank you.